was my second time when I had a chance to read this paper, because I also read the earlier draft around like 6 months ago. I think there was a seminar in private law organized by Daniel Markowitz at Yale, and so I read the earlier draft. So it was also a nice exercise for me to go through both drafts and to see how my older thoughts about the paper are still valid, and to what extent there are some new ideas out there. And in general, I like the paper. I like the way how it tries to both engage in a discourse with the book by Katarina Bistor, but also the way how it tries to somehow reverse engineer how law, in particular private law, in particular contract and property law, as both the product and the driving factor of capitalism. And in my reaction to the paper, I would like to make 5 points, and maybe starting with the title, the Gods and Immortals. I absolutely agree that probably one of the main factors that fuel the development of capitalism is the fact that the legal or institutional structure of the capital market, of the capitalist market, allows for immense creativity, allows for innovation, both the economic innovation, market innovation, but also for legal innovation, which sometimes can precede economic innovation. Sometimes it can be the outcome or the let's say ramification of new ways of, for example, accruing profit from the market or commodifying certain assets. In this sense, I think, however, that it would be interesting if the paper could maybe go a step further and try to think not only to what extent the legal system, in particular freedom of contract, as Marita our rights puts down in the text, facilitates creativity, but whether, and if so to what extent, in the legal order we have some checks and balances in creativity. And what checks and balances that might be. So can we think about courts? Can we think about fundamental rights? Can we think about some kind of a political control of the market? So, and of course I don't have a clear answer to this, but I think there is at least a question that might be posed in this regard, because this is not only like a one-directional avenue, it's I think a more complex picture regarding the law, in particular contract and property law, and innovation. Also innovation about the legal concepts themselves, so for example, regarding some innovative ways of using the property rights, like for example the numerus clausus principle in property law. Also on page 5, also still regarding the Gods and Immortals, you write that private law subjects are equal in terms of inventing new forms of capitalism or new ways of commodifying assets or new ways of using some conventional legal institutions. But here I have a question mark in my head. To what extent this is really true, and what might be the limitations to this equality? Because I don't think this equality is full. I think there is a very maybe implicit but immense problem of quality of knowledge, because its innovation is very strongly based on knowledge and expertise, and people, market actors, are not equal in terms of knowledge and expertise they have that would allow them to innovate. Of course, in particular stages of development of capitalist market or capitalism structure, we I think could experience various degrees of openness of the entire structure for this sort of equality you write about. So, for example, currently the phenomenon of startups, I think, is a very nice substantiation for your claim. However, again, I don't think there is any kind of like a full, unconstrained equality in functional sense. Of course, in formal sense, with freedom of contract, with private autonomy, this equality, of course, exists. Secondly, the question of commodification. I remember when I read your paper for the first time, I was very positively touched by the way you refer to Pashukanis, and I think he's a fascinating thinker, and also his life story and like period in the development of legal, of private law theory or legal theory when he was active is a very particular one. However, I think it might be interesting perhaps to maybe write a little bit more about his theory, because I think at least in terms of the paper, if somebody doesn't have much knowledge about Pashukanis, it may be slightly obscure how he understands this fetishization of commodity, of property. There is also on page 6-7 you write more about commodification, I think, and I completely agree with you that there is this let's say reciprocal relationship between the market and the law, or capital and the law. That law is both the product of the capital, it's like the superstructure in Marxist terms, and also is something that shapes the structure of the market and the capitalist industry. It came to my mind, but maybe you disagree, maybe the others would also disagree, that it might be also interesting to speculate if you take this vantage point, to what extent we can talk about law as both the base and superstructure in Marxist terms. I know it's maybe like a very kind of like nerdy intra-Marxist debate, but I think it could be something at least I would be happy to think about. And finally, when you talk about commodification and about this, let's say, dual relationship between the market or capital or assets and law, I think a very neat example to understand and to illustrate this might be what happened to data and how data was commodified by, let's say, sheer market force. So they use how, so the way how platforms like Google, Facebook, Amazon start using data was primarily the act of like almost pure market innovation. So they simply understood that it's possible to use data, it's possible to sell to the others some products, some services which are based on data. However, later on, the legislation, the law, kicked in, and what we have in, for example, in the European Union regarding GDPR and this entire architecture of privacy and data protection which is based on consent, it is, I think, and I remember recently I had a similar discussion with Julie Cohen from Georgetown about it. It is much more about, let's say, somehow entrenching the market value of data, more about creating some kind of justification, legitimization, as you would say, for the fact that some private entities are collecting data, are analyzing them, are selling them to the others, than an attempt to decommodify data. And then my next point is the concept of legitimacy. So you said that on page 8 you say the magic of the law is real and actually conveys legitimacy to the institutions it creates, and then in the conclusions you say that you cannot see much of the crisis of legitimacy, of like the legitimizing of power or legitimacy of the legal system. I was wondering whether you mean here like the formal legitimacy, that, for example, you can protect your property using some tools that are catered for by the legal system, or whether you were thinking also about some kind of like the political or ethical legitimacy that the law would convey. And finally, like these are two interconnected points. So, can law heal capitalism? Because I understand this is also, maybe not also, this is the main point of your paper. And here, first of all, I was a little bit perplexed, and it's not only about your paper; it's about the entire debate about let's say, market law and the possibility to use law to cure some deficits of capitalism. what is our concept of state in this? Because sometimes I have the idea that we overlook, first of all, that the state is also or can be the actor of the capitalist market. So the state is not this abstract arbiter who sits somewhere in the clouds and only regulates. The state is also directly interested in certain trajectory of market development, and sometimes the state is also acting on the market, for example, by owning some enterprises. Secondly, how we understand state from the perspective of, let's say, the lobbyist power. I know it's a very trivial way of putting this, but the lobbyist power of the capital. So when you look, for example, into what happened to the digital market regulation and how particular countries, for example, in Europe, were a little bit defenseless towards big tech, or even to what extent the US is defenseless towards big tech, and to what extent some kind of the Safra state structure, like the EU, became relatively efficient in just putting forward some innovative regulatory concepts. I think it might be also an interesting example to substantiate your claim. And I know I'm talking for too long, so this is the very last thing, and this is something I noted here, but then in your presentation you partly answered this question, because you said that one of your key questions is the bargaining power question. Yes, so I was going to ask to what extent you think the redistributive solutions which you write about, for example, taxation or this palliative redistribution by Edmond Kennedy, is the only way of getting out of the problems with inequality and capitalism in general we have, or to what extent we can think about, let's say, equalizing the access to the market and somehow equalizing the market power as another alternative or intertwined avenue for doing this. And maybe we can, instead of palliative redistribution, we can say of some kind of palliative autonomy, which can be restored or protected in some selected parts of the market. But thank you so much.
Thank you.